Welcome back to The Rancher's Voice, the podcast where the heart of agriculture meets the pulse of today's industry. From policy changes to pressing issues, The Rancher's Voice dives into the stories that matter most to ag producers.
In each episode, we will cover topics including legislation, leadership, and the agricultural lifestyle. So be sure to subscribe to The Rancher's Voice everywhere podcasts are featured. If podcasts aren't your thing, watch us on the Montana Stock Growers YouTube channel.
Welcome back to the Capital Edition. It's Rayleigh and Ellie. We took last week off and we're back to give you a full recap of the last 2 weeks of legislative session and things going on both in Helena, but as well as Washington, D.C. How are you doing, Ellie?
I'm good. I've been busy, and so have you.
Yeah, so this week is a transmittal break of the legislature, so we are not up at the Helena Capitol this week, which is kind of nice. It gives us an opportunity to reset and kind of follow up on things, keep up to date. And so for those who aren't familiar with transmittal is like the halfway point of legislative session. So any non-revenue bills that have not gotten out of the first house are now not able to kind of proceed. So it's a pretty high pressured and fast moving week or two leading up to transmittal, because if, like I said, if you don't have a revenue bill, your bill must pass out of committee and the floor and head to the second chamber if you want your bill to stay alive. So having it first session, Ellie, any thoughts or insights leading up to transmittal?
The week leading up to transmittal was probably one of the busiest. I probably say that every week, but it was crazy. I mean, the floor agendas were 40 bills on second reading, and then there was a whole second agenda. So both the House and the Senate were seeing like 80 bills a day for 3 or 4 days straight that week. So it was absolutely nuts. But it was kind of fun. I don't know. It's a different
Yeah.
energy. It's a different vibe at the Capitol, and um, you get to hear a lot of bills all on the same day. So
Yeah, lots to keep track of. It actually from a lobbyist standpoint gives you kind of an opportunity. It's actually a little more organized and a lot more compact, so you can actually track things a lot quicker and kind of keep track of things. So glad that is we have hit that point, and now we are headed into the second stretch of legislative session, which will continue to be jam-packed and full, but we'll see a lot more bills that have revenue tied to them and things like that as we kind of head towards that 90 days of legislative session. So
yeah.
um, what we thought we would do is kind of give you a rundown of some of the key bills that we've been getting phone calls or emails about and just give some status updates. Obviously, if you do get an email from us with our full legislative list, I would encourage you to check the full list out of all the bills, and there's links there as well as our positions. So would encourage you, if there's something that we don't mention, to check out that list.
But before we do that, can we talk about you in DC last week?
Sure.
So you and the officers were in DC, meeting with different agencies and the delegation. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I actually missed part of transmittal and was in Washington, D.C. with President Leslie Robinson, First Vice President Turk Stovall, and our Second Vice President Monty Lesh. And we were there for 4 days and had a great jam-packed agenda. I would say that the landscape has definitely changed in DC with the changing of the administrations. There's a new energy in town, lots of changing. Granted, some of that change is kind of unknown at this point, lots of movement, but definitely the energy has changed. And so for us, our goal was kind of to get boots on the hill and really talk about some of our producer profitability initiative things, as well as just meet with our new delegation who, we have now Senator Sheehy in office, as well as Congressman Downing, and meet with some of the new agency folks. Granted, a lot of the new appointed positions were not, like, those individuals are not in place yet, but some of the lower staff members are. So we were able to kind of meet some of the new faces and talk about a lot of issues.
Well, that's awesome. So I know, like you just mentioned, you talked to a lot of different people, but what are a few highlights of those meetings that you had? What were some of the the biggest ones?
Yeah, so for us, one thing that we did that we don't typically do when we're in DC was that we had the opportunity to attend some of the House congressional hearings, subcommittees. And so when we arrived in DC on that Tuesday, we were able to split up, and I attended the House Natural Resources Subcommittee where they had an ESA hearing kind of about um, large predators and the impacts of pretty much wolves and grizzly bears on livestock producers. So I was able to sit in on that committee. That was really interesting. And for those of you who are familiar with the Public Lands Council, the Secretary Robbie LaValle actually testified on behalf of producers. So that was a great hearing. Obviously, the I would say the Republican side of the committee were very much advocating for ranchers and landowners and the delisting of both wolves and grizzly bears. The Democratic side of the committee very much was focused on climate change, protection of wildlife, those types of things. So, very uh, 180, I guess, talking points from one another. And then outside of that committee, other officers went to the House Agriculture Subcommittee where they did a like state of the livestock industry committee hearing as well. And so there were ranchers from across the country that gave updates on things happening from the livestock industry. So that was exciting. That's, like I said, something that we don't typically do, but really enjoyable and good just to kind of get in front of those committees and be part of the audience and listening to those hearings. Um, a lot of what we talked about are things that are like near and dear to, our PPI initiatives. So we talked a lot about death tax, but some of the things that we also talked about were like budget cuts. Obviously, a lot of agencies and folks don't really know where things stand yet, and so they're kind of waiting. They've lost employees, they're bringing back some employees. The budget ends on March 14th. They don't know if there's going to be a CR or what that CR looks like. So, a lot of moving parts right now, but we also kind of talked about like wildlife services and all of the money related to like predator management and some of the issues and gaps that we're seeing there. We talked about, like I said, the death tax, lots of conversations about labor as well. Obviously, there's a big conversation about immigration right now in Washington, D.C., and making sure that while that's an important conversation, the use and the ability for agriculture to use like H-2A workers is still really important. So lots of really great conversations with a variety of different groups, agencies, and our delegation.
So, like you said, many of those things were really specific to PPI, which I think is kind of interesting, just that that's what we were talking about last year. And then with the administration change, those same topics seem to be kind of rising to the top with the administration as well. So, I think that's just kind of an interesting observation. Um, so you said you met with some agencies. Which agencies did you meet with
Yeah.
this week?
So we were able to meet with USDA and their Deputy Undersecretary Kristen Sleeper and some of her team, the new Chief Forester, Tom Schultz, which some of our listeners may be familiar with. Tom currently worked in Idaho, but had previously worked in Montana in DNRC for many, many years. He was just named the new chief of the Forest Service, and he was on day one and actually attended our meeting. So that was great to see him. So lots of conversations within USDA. We also talked about like risk management programs, some of those things. And then we also were able to meet with Acting Director John Raby over at the BLM as well. John actually he has spent some time in Montana too. So great to have folks kind of familiar with Montana and some of our issues in the meetings that we were meeting with. I would just say from a BLM standpoint, obviously the new director is not in place and hasn't been confirmed, but I am cautiously optimistic that we will be seeing some significant review and potential recommendations to roll back some of the items and initiatives that we saw under the last administration.
So you met with some agencies, went to committee hearings. You also met with our delegation. So how did that go, and who did you meet with?
Yeah, so we were lucky enough to meet with all of the four elected officials for Montana. So met with Senator Daines. We also spent some additional time with Senator Daines' staff talking about issues. Met with Senator Sheehy, which obviously is a great meeting, and excited to have him be in Washington, D.C., as well as Represent or Congressman Zinke and Congressman Downing. Um, Overall, like very much those offices are in line with and aware of our producer profitability initiative and really working on some of the same things that are near and dear to livestock producers. So excited to see as we kind of as they progress into this year, see where we can collaborate and work together. But obviously, great representatives for Montana, and great to have them meeting with us and being a part of the livestock community in our conversations. So that's just a quick recap of DC, but let's hop back to Helena and do a quick recap on some of the bills and some of the statuses of those bills as we kind of wrap up this podcast. And then again, like I mentioned, really encourage folks to take a listen at our full list. It is in our weekly legislative email, but also if you have any questions, you can go to our website at mtbeef.org and go under the legislature tab, and you'll see our full list of bills and the bills that we're tracking. So, Ellie, I know you've actually spent a lot more time than me in some of the appropriations hearings, whether it's subcommittee in Section C or the larger appropriations committee. So tell us a few things about where we're at from a money standpoint.
Yeah. So the general agency budgets that we've talked about in weeks before for Department of Livestock or Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, those have been voted out of the subcommittee and are still kind of working their way through the process. So we'll continue tracking those as they're very important. And then in front of like the general appropriation subcommittees, we see a lot of the bills that we talk about there. Just kind of seeing what that fiscal note is and how it's going to affect different uh, revenue accounts within the state. So, like Rayleigh said, that is a committee I'm in pretty regularly. So, yeah, they do a good job.
So far, that committee definitely has just heard bills. This second half of session now will be the putting the puzzle together, right? Like they have all of these bills with all different revenue notes or fiscal notes, and how does it all fit into the state budget? So that's obviously something that we'll be watching as we kind of head into the second stretch. Always a very interesting and challenging task that those both finance and claims and
Mhm.
appropriations has as they kind of start picking winners and losers, which is kind of the unfortunate part of that committee. So all right, fire is another area that we have kind of talked about in a lot of our updates. Just wanted to give a brief update for folks on those. There's four bills that we've testified or and are tracking and taking positions on. All four of those bills are currently still moving through the process and still alive. And so, as we kind of start this next half of the session, we will be testifying and following those. But all of the bills related to, fire suppression and funding and prescribed burns, all of those are still at play.
Then in Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, this has also been a really busy area for us this session, but there's just a couple that are kind of important to hit on, and we're looking at some bills just with private property, trespass, kind of increasing the protections for landowners and creating stricter punishments essentially for violations of trespass rules when hunting, fishing, trapping, that sort of thing. So, that bill was passed through the House and has now been referred to a Senate committee, so that's a great thing. And then, so the next bill in Fish, Wildlife, and Parks was House Bill 648. So this one required FWP notification before the release of large predators. We opposed this bill until amendments were added, and we offered some amendments. The bill sponsor accepted those amendments, and they have been added onto the bill. So we will be supporting that bill with the amendments that have been added onto it.
Can you share a little bit about what those amendments were?
Yeah. So The bill essentially made it so that if a large predator was being captured somewhere in the state, and then was to be released somewhere else, within 30 days, the department was supposed to notify county governments or tribal governments. We kind of said that's not really realistic. If you're capturing a grizzly bear somewhere, what are we going to do with the grizzly bear for 30 days before it's released? So those amendments now say that if it's relocated, into a county other than the one it was captured in, that's only a 24-hour notice. That way they can capture the bear and move it and release it immediately. And then also within 24 hours, if the large predator is being released into a previously approved FWP commission location site for grizzly bear relocation. So that should kind of clean that up, make it so we're not holding these predators, but also ensure that local governments and tribal governments are being informed when large predators might be released in their area.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality was we were never going to be able to hold large predators for 30 days,
No.
and that bill an expectation was kind of out of the scope of how wildlife management occurs related to predators. So, great job getting that amendment added to the bill. Um, Talking about livestock a little bit more in our livestock bucket, we've had quite a few questions about House Bill 19 and what the status of House Bill 19 is. And really, no movement has happened. So that bill passed out of House Agriculture, has been transmitted to the Senate and is awaiting a Senate hearing. So nothing has changed since probably the last time reported on House Bill 19, but would anticipate seeing a Senate hearing in the near future. Again, another bill that we've been asked quite a bit about following the bill hearing was House Bill 418, which was in regards to banning mRNA vaccines for animals in Montana. I'm happy to report that MSGA opposed that bill, and we were successful in getting that bill tabled in committee so that bill did not move forward with the transmittal date. In natural resources, we have a few bills related to energy and solar specifically. I know this is a big topic back in Eastern or over in Eastern Montana. Representative Durham has House Bill 31, which is regarding decommissioning of solar facilities. That bill is currently still alive and in process. And then Senate Bill 160, excuse me, Senator Bob Phelan had an additional alternative energy regarding bonding of the construction of solar projects. That bill has been tabled in its committee.
In state trust lands, we have House Bill 80 that we've talked about a few times now, and this is just again to provide cash lease only bidding for ag leases on state trust lands. This bill has passed through the House, the Senate, and is in enrollment now and heading towards the governor's desk for signature. So we were happy to support that and happy to see it flow through. Um,
We also
another,
been
oh,
working on House Bill 676, which Speaker Lear has brought forward. This is a bill that is very concerning to us, and we've opposed in multiple committees as well as um, shared our concerns with legislators on the floor. But what it's doing is putting an end date to the water adjudication process in the water court, as well as requiring the state that if there are parcels of land that have water rights on them, that are isolated, but isolated is not necessarily clearly defined, that the state would be required to sell those parcels of land. So a lot of concerns related to a variety of different issues, whether it's water court adjudication issues or how state land trust lands should be managed. And so we have been working that bill and opposing it. It did get through the House. And is now being transmitted to the Senate. So we will continue to advocate our points as it goes into the Senate and has its hearings there.
and I would
Um,
add there's a pretty significant fiscal component to that as well. It will be a large cost to the department and the state as a whole if the bill is passed. So
yeah,
that is a
very,
concern for us as well.
very valid point. And then finally, from a state trust lands perspective, we are happy to report that Senate Bill 381, which was Senator Emmerich's bill to allow for homesteading on certain parcels of land, of certain parcels of state trust land, was tabled in committee with a 11-0 vote. So that bill will not be moving forward.
In tax, there are lots of tax bills still at play right now. Some bills have been amended, so we're currently evaluating those bills this week, and we'll kind of see how they come back after transmittal in the different chambers and committees, and kind of see what happens there, and if other amendments are added as well. So
Yeah, what's interesting in tax is that there are a lot of bills that have a lot of different ideas, and we're getting to a point that like some are being amended and new ideas are being thrown out or amended into bills, and we're gonna have to have a reconciliation at some point to make sure that all of these bills could work together or can't work together. So, like you said, we're evaluating, and we'll see where we get in the next couple weeks. And finally, wanted to hit on a few water policy bills that we have been tracking. So you've heard us talk a lot about the comprehensive water review. Um, five bills that have kind of been products of that comprehensive water review, whether it's creating the special revenue for a water trust or working through provisional permits. We've also seen waiver of adverse effect. Those bills, as well as the exempt well bill. So five of the comp review bills have had hearings and are moving through the process. None of them are tabled or anything at this point. So continuing to move forward there. One thing I would note on the exempt well bill, because I've had a few questions about that, is the exempt well bill that is Senate Bill 358. That bill does have a fiscal fee on it, and so it is a revenue bill, and so has not moved out of its first chamber, but it still has time. I would also report that there was a bill in response to that exempt well bill that was brought forward by Representative Mike Vinton, which is House Bill 704. That bill was killed on the floor. It very much expanded the use of exempt wells and how development could use it. We were successful in getting that killed on the floor. So the bill in response to the exempt well bill is no longer at play, or at least that bill in response to the exempt well bill is no longer at play. A couple other bills that we wanted to highlight, lots of conversations early on in the session about how water cases would be managed post final decree. There was a group that brought Senate Bill 186, which was a bill saying that all water right issues needed to go through the district court. We opposed that bill. That bill also failed moving forward in second reading on the floor. So that bill is also now not at play. And then some other bills regarding state ownership of water rights, Senate Bill 263. We have opposed that bill. It has moved through its first House and is headed the House committee. So we'll be watching that and continuing to work that bill, as well as Senate Bill 436, which was some additional language and changes regarding exempt well bills. We have opposed that. It did get transmitted to the House during this week. So lots happening in the water world. Just kind of a summary of where we're at with things this session. I would say that we're seeing a lot less like wildlife issues and agriculture issues and bills like that, and a lot more in the natural resources space as well as water. So we'll continue to keep you guys posted as we move into the second half of legislative session. But want to thank you for listening, and always encourage you to take a look at our website if you have questions on bills, or feel free to reach out to our office with any questions that you might have. Looking forward to talking to you next week, and have a great day.